Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hammer Intern Podcast. I'm Natalie, and I'm here with interns Alyssa, Haley, and Lily. And the topic and title of this podcast is The Ideal Psychology Student, a guide for aspiring undergraduate psychology majors. Before we get into it, we'll give you some context of who we are and how we got recording to this today. So, I'm Natalie. My major is psychology. I'm a senior this year. I'll be graduating in May 2022. And my current interests right now are in IO psychology, but I also wanted to check out counseling psychology as well. And that's kind of how I learned about Dr. Hammer's program, because you deal right with mock therapy. So that's a little bit about me. Haley, how about you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Haley. I'm also a psychology major, as well as political science. I'm graduating this December, so I'm a senior right now. And I'm applying to clinical psychology PhD programs. My broad interest is in intimate partner violence and trauma responses. And I'm really interested in Dr. Hammer's internship because I've just heard really great things about his mentorship.
I'm Lily. I'm also a psychology major with a minor in criminology. I'm also a senior at UK. I plan to graduate in May of 2022. My current psych interests include children and trauma and basically coping mechanisms. I was originally interested in Dr. Hammer's counseling internship because I wanted to do counseling psychology as a graduate degree, but now I'm more focused on marriage and family therapy.
Yeah, my name's Alyssa. I'm also a psychology major. I'm actually a junior, and I plan to graduate in May of 2023. My current psychology interests include counseling in children and adolescents, and I learned about Dr. Hammer's counseling internship by a friend who actually did the internship prior.
The four of us are part of Dr. Hammer's interns for EDP 605, the Counseling Psychology Internship Training Program.
In this program, the interns will help our graduate students in the counseling psychology program learn basic counseling techniques. So we often demonstrate these techniques in class with the help of being a mock therapy client, so we call it. And this role will be played by the undergraduate Psychology 399/499 interns, who in this semester is the four of us, and we're able to convincingly act like a person who is seeking therapy for help with things such as anxiety, depression, or any other mental health concerns. So in short, the intern serves as a standardized/simulated patient of sorts while getting to take on a role in the graduate seminar, which is awesome because we get to learn alongside of the graduate students. So does anyone want to kind of talk about how they got here and why they like this program so far?
I think, so each of us had an interest in learning more about counseling psychology, whether it was something we were considering going into professionally or just wanting to learn a little bit more. And we all agreed that there was no better way to get insight than participating in it this way.
So since we're junior and senior psychology majors at UK, our goal is to help other UK students be as prepared for graduate school in psychology as possible. So the role of this podcast is we're going to talk a little bit about Dr. Hammer's guide to being the best ideal psychology student and applicant, and describe how students at UK can make this guide accessible and achieve these ideas. Dr. Joseph Hammer is an associate professor and director of training in the Department of Educational, School, and Counseling Psychology here at the University of Kentucky. He conducts research broadly in help-seeking and multicultural measurement evaluation, and this examines facilitators and barriers of help-seeking behavior. He also teaches graduate-level courses such as Introduction to Counseling Techniques. Most relevant to this podcast, Dr. Hammer considers himself a mentor. So on his website, you can Google it. You can find at drjosephhammer.com. He has created several resources to help students be admitted into a variety of different graduate programs in psychology.
One really helpful resource is his framework called What the Ideal Psychology Graduate School Applicant Looks Like, which is designed to give undergraduates some insight into what they can do for their 4 years to increase their chance at an acceptance. We will go over what this framework looks like briefly and then give you feasible examples of ideas for how, if you are an undergraduate student at UK, that you can work to hit all of these points. So for those of you listening, here's a list of things that Dr. Hammer notes in this framework that make an ideal applicant. Strong GPA, typically above a 3.5, strong GRE. Keep in mind that clinical and counseling professors are aware that the GRE is culturally biased, which means above a 160 on the verbal and above the 50 on the quant. Good writing skills and research experience, specifically working in 2 labs for 2 semesters each. Idea about research on what you like to conduct for the future, applied helping experience, and openness to learning about diversity.
When I first read this guide, it sounded super daunting to check all these things off. But I think that once we break down how a student can tangibly complete each of these requirements over the course of 4 years, students will realize that it is obtainable. Next, we are going to talk about developing one of the most important intrinsic traits that a psychologist could have, which is awareness of diversity.
Developing an awareness of diversity was something I did not even remotely consider when going into this internship. And so thankfully, this internship, EDP 605, does a really good job at introducing us a lot of topics in social justice awareness. And so, join the EDP internship. So as an intern, like we said, you'll serve as a mock therapy client. In this role, you'll be playing as you're in your internship. You're going to act like a person who is seeking therapy. Maybe you need help with anxiety or depression or some other mental health concern. And the good thing is you don't need any acting or theater experience. So this course now begins with a heavy emphasis on social justice issue awareness. So right now, expect discussions about racism, sexism, ableism, transphobia, just to name a few, and also ethnocentrism, and that means the dominance of white culture. And as we've learned, white culture dominance, it dominates a lot of the research and counseling psychology skill sets out there today. So we're working to kind of reverse that and improve our awareness of other cultures. And so all this is groundwork to be a better and more accommodating counseling therapist for clients of many backgrounds and identities. So in addition to the EDP internship, you could join a diversity and inclusion coalition on campus. And for example, the Lewis Honors College has the Lewis Student Diversity and Inclusion Coalition. So Haley has a little bit to say about that.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything Natalie said. I think that while it's kind of immeasurable to talk about diversity, and you can't measure that achievement of being culturally humble and competent, it is a really important skill because as therapists, we want to do we want to help as much as we can and cause as much harm, or cause as little harm, my goodness, as possible. So I feel so much more comfortable talking about issues of diversity and inclusion after this internship. But if you want to take it a step farther and really do the work of, social justice and creating a more inclusive environment at UK, like Natalie said, you can join a diversity and inclusion coalition. So I have been a part of the one in the Lewis Honors College, and our mission is just to advocate for students from underrepresented and minoritized groups, as well as first-generation college students, and to generate ideas for building a culture of belonging in the Lewis Honors College. So some of the things that I have been a part of during my time on this coalition is planning events such as film viewings, with directors of these marginalized groups. I've helped plan panel discussions to kind of talk about how the college can forward diversity and inclusion. Heritage Month observation. So, for example, Black History Month was a big one that we put on last year to kind of make our college more celebratory of diversity. And of course, workshops. It's important to educate others in our community and teach them this knowledge that we've been so lucky to get the chance to discuss. So.
As we mentioned, joining organizations on campus is one way to develop cultural humility, but it is also a great way to check off the next point on our list, which is developing leadership skills.
Yeah, so one of the ways that you can develop leadership skills is joining Psych. Psych is a National Honor Society for psychology students. There is a GPA requirement to join. You have to have at least a 3.2 overall GPA and a 3.0 psychology GPA. You also have to be at least a second semester sophomore. The benefits of joining Psych are that you have the opportunity to earn scholarships, funding for research projects, and potentially become a published author. As a member, you attend chapter meetings where you discuss topics such as the GRE, career areas in Psych, and getting into grad school. There are also guest speakers. Psych is a great way to not only get involved, but also gain honors while an undergraduate, which will look good on a graduate application.
Another thing that you could join here as an undergraduate at UK is the mentor program for psych students. It was one of the first things I heard about as an undergraduate, and it immediately sparked my interest. Coming from out of state and not knowing a whole bunch of people, I thought it would be a great way for me to meet new people who were in the same major as me and could give me more information about psychology, but also UK in general. And I loved it. Everyone was super kind and helpful, and so when the time came that I could become a mentor, I decided that that's what I should do. My mentee is super sweet and we get along really well. The program will match you up with your mentee through interests and class level. The program has helped me learn so much about what it means to be a good leader and helped made me a better psychology student, not only through helping others, but them helping me as well. Another organization that you can join is the PSA, which stands for the Psychology Student Association. It's one of the easiest and best ways to get involved as an undergrad. There are many benefits to joining this club, such as a suicide prevention workshop, career nights, clinical career opportunities, careers in neuroscience and neuropsychology, an intro to criminal profiling, resume workshops, graduate opportunities in forensic psychology, and there's no GPA requirement to join, and it's available for psychology majors and minors. So overall, it's just an easy way to get involved and to build your resume.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Now that we have demonstrated some internal skills such as being culturally aware and being a leader, now we're going to talk about some hard skills that upper level psych students should work on to develop through research and clinical settings.
Yeah, the R word, research, but it's not as scary as a lot of undergraduates think it is. So, getting involved in research. It may seem really daunting at first, but because UK is a Research One institution, many professors run their own research labs. So it's easier than you think. And a great first step to getting involved in research is visiting the Office for Undergraduate Research. They will be able to help you find labs that are currently looking for research assistants and that they think would be a good fit for you, because at the end of the day, that's also very important. Additionally, if you want to do research within the psychology department, you can visit the faculty page and read about what kind of research they conduct. If one stands out as particularly interesting to you, you can email them, introduce yourself, and ask if they are looking for any research assistance. And so, a question you might also have, what should you look for in a lab? So let's go back to Dr. Hammer's framework. He says he recommends doing a research assistantship in 2 research labs with at least 2 semesters in one of those labs. And your goal is to learn and practice the skills from different parts of the research cycle. Okay, what is the research cycle? There's a lot of components to it. There's conceptualization. So what are you going to do in this project? There's a literature review. That's a lot of reading, research articles, a lot of database searching. There's also the design of the project, the IRB approval, recruitment, data collection, analysis, writing up your findings, and then also putting it in a poster or presentation or paper. So summarizing essentially everything you did. And ideally, you'll have taken on more complex tasks and you'll show an increasing level of autonomy. And so an example of this, you could conduct your own study with the help of a mentor. And that's something that Dr. Hammer expects of his own graduate students. And so some of us have already had research experience. Haley in particular has a really cool story of how she got into undergraduate research.
Yeah, so I'd love to, talk more about my research experience and give you kind of a tangible example of what it could look like for you. Of course, everyone's research journey is going to be different. I can honestly say that, research for me was one of the most formative parts of my undergrad. So during my freshman year, I got involved by just cold emailing a bunch of professors, including Dr. Golding. And I asked him if I could work in his psychology and law laboratory because forensic psychology was one of my main interests back then. He asked me to interview for his lab, and I got the position starting the next fall. So then that first fall of my sophomore year, I enrolled in Psychology 394, which is just the class you can enroll in to earn credit for conducting research in a lab. And there's where I really learned the basics of the research process. So that semester, Dr. Golding was examining how jailhouse informants in the trial of murder cases can influence a jury decision. So my main tasks were to just run the in-person jury by playing the trial tape, giving the jury deliberation instructions, and taking their votes of guilty or not guilty for the trial that they were listening to. And these research tasks, they were very basic back then, but the next year I was able to gain independence in the lab by writing and conducting my first authored honors thesis, which means that I designed the research question and methodologies pretty much by myself. And then I authored that manuscript and poster for the project. And in this role, I really gained a deep understanding of what it is like to conduct independent research in graduate school or like a PhD program or something like that. So after I finished my thesis, I was really proud of all that I had accomplished, but I knew that, I probably wasn't going to go into forensic psychology anymore. So I wanted to find a lab that had a more clinical counseling research focus. So I applied to work with Dr. Hammer. He also has a laboratory here on campus, the Hammer Laboratory. And I've just been loving this ongoing experience so far because I have helped with a lot of really awesome projects that investigate what facilitates or inhibits mental help seeking in certain situations. So I used to do really heavy quantitative projects, but transitioning into this new lab has allowed me to work on a lot of qualitative projects as well. So it's been good to get a different sampling of different methodologies and things like that. So yeah, that's just kind of why it's important to be in 2 labs during undergrad so that you can get a taste of all the different types of research projects and learn from different mentors.
Yeah, I really like hearing how, you kind of just were very eager to get on it freshman year and we're just kind of shooting your shot, seeing who, what labs are available and, eventually finding your fit. So it's really neat. I kind of did a little bit of that myself. I went to the office hours of my then developmental psychology professor. This was my sophomore year because I myself was also and still very ambitious and I wanted to know and look into research opportunities. But unfortunately, my professor said he was retiring soon. But, because the faculty here at UK are awesome, they're going to connect you with other faculty that also would suit your interests. And that's exactly what he did. And so he gave me a list of other professors that had similar research interests as his. and I went around to their office hours. So I went and met with them in person, and I shared kind of what my general interests were, and we talked about their own. And finally, I found a lab that was a really good fit for me. And I've since been in Dr. Christia Spears Brown, Dr. Brown's lab for almost 2 years. And I've learned a lot about the research process, especially since COVID this last year. It's put a little bit of a pause on that data collection because we do a lot of work in schools. So had a little bit of a break there, but I'm currently working with her for my senior year thesis project. And I mention this because professors really love their students that show initiative and a genuine interest in learning more about a topic that they're curious about. And so emailing is a good start, and eventually having a face-to-face interactions will really sell yourself. So those are our recommendations for getting into a research lab.
So for those of you who weren't really interested in research like me, I was more focused on how can I do counseling? I happened to run into my junior year a developmental psych class. I was like, oh, I'm really interested in developmental psychology, and I decided to take it. And the class is actually Psych 460, which is the process of psychological development, and it's with Dr. Sydney. And basically what I didn't understand about the class until I was in it was that you create your own research project. You start by finding out what your interests are, and you do it with a group, but you find out what your interests were. And my group's particular interest was in sibling attachment and how do siblings of different ages feel attached to each other and what is their relationship like. So my group decided that that was going to be what we wanted to look at. We came up with the research question. We came up with the Qualtrics information on how we were going to test that. We did our own analysis of data. We created our own presentations and presented it to the class. So it was really all of us undergraduate students working together, creating our own idea of what we wanted to research, which I think was really powerful for me, trying to figure out what I really wanted to do with my future career, because before I had no interest in understanding sibling attachment, and that really focused me in on working with children and really brought an interest to me that I didn't see before. So I think if you're not interested in working in a particular lab, I would definitely take one of the Psych 400 level classes, because it is creating your own research and creating your own thing, which I found really helpful and really powerful for my undergraduate and continuing on into my graduate degree.
All health service psychology programs, including both counseling, psychology, and clinical programs, expect their students to develop both research and clinical skills. Though the amount of emphasis on the two things can vary from program to program. So for example, a PhD program in clinical psychology will really want research skills, whereas counseling psych may be more on the clinical skills side. So since we already talked about the importance of undergraduate research, we're going to kind of transition to tell you some more ways that you can gain some clinical experience.
A staple internship experience at UK is the internship at the Harris Center of Psychology Services, which is an outpatient mental health center that offers affordable mental health care services to the community. It is also a training center where the clinical psychology doctoral students complete their clinical training. In this internship, you can receive course credit through Psych 399 for working a total of 9 hours per week. And you complete tasks such as scheduling appointments, keeping track of patient payments, scoring psychological tests, and greeting patients. Many of us on the podcast have completed this internship, and it has been one of the most wonderful experiences. I did the Harris Center internship in the spring of 2021, and it was probably one of the best things I did in undergraduate. My favorite part of it was when we would discuss the client intakes and just seeing the doctoral students interact with each other and talk about how they would process this client and how they would offer therapy to them was just so insightful and really gave me a lot of knowledge about what actual therapy looks like, which is what I want to do. So it was really cool to see possibly my future playing out right before my eyes. And I know Natalie and Haley have also been part of the Harris Center internship. So if either of you would like to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta agree. That's also one of my favorite parts of it. I did the Harris internship this past summer, so in 2021. And, like Lily said, seeing the doctoral students kind of talk about their patient intakes and what their, recommendations were for treatment plans for them was just so cool. It was the real deal, not what you see like on TV shows. Like it was just so cool to witness. And I also say another cool part with the internship is your individual project you do. You yourself kind of go in depth on one of the treatment manuals that they give you. And my topic of choice was around eating disorders. So I got to go into one of the treatment manuals typically used for that and then kind of teach the other interns about it. And that was a pretty unique experience for me. And and so these types of clinical experiences can be hard to come by, partially due to the confidentiality laws guarding therapy practices, but don't stress too much about this because there are a lot of other ways and opportunities to showcase your helping abilities, one of which you can become a type of psychology tutor. And currently at UK, there's the Psychology Peer Tutor Program or Supplemental Instruction Leadership Program, also for the Psych 100 class. And for this, you can receive course credit or you can be paid for this experience. And along the way, you are able to make connections with students. You're able to really practice your listening skills by helping them through their, content difficulties with the course. And you get teaching experience too, which could potentially be advantageous if you're going into grad school and maybe looking into a TA position. So I found that very rewarding to be a mentor to younger students in psychology as well. But it doesn't stop there. There's other opportunities, on-campus ones as well as off-campus opportunities to learn and practice helping skills. For example, there's the Ampersand Sexual Violence Resource Center of the Bluegrass. There's also Big Brothers, Big Sisters of the Bluegrass, Bluegrass Council of the Blind, CASA, that's CASA of Lexington, Dress for Success, Lexington. There's also Girls on the Run. I did that my freshman and sophomore year. I was a head coach there, and that's where you get to help 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade girls kind of build confidence and running and fitness capabilities, and you eventually kind of do weekly practices and games to kind of build them up to an end of the semester 5K, which is super fun. There's also Greenhouse 17, the Hope Center, International Book Project, Lex Arts, National Alliance on Mental Health, the Ronald McDonald House Charities of the Bluegrass, and the Next.
I've definitely have not done all of those internships. It is impossible to, dip your feet in all of them. But, I think that also, it doesn't have to be always, strictly clinical in a psychological service center. Like we've mentioned, like the helping skills is really what you want to focus on during undergrad. So, in addition to doing the Harris Center, research, things like that, I've found that being an orientation leader and mentor to first-year transitioning students has been really rewarding through the Lewis Honors College. You get to meet with students who might be having a hard time with homesickness, making friends in college, just the transition in general, and, practice listening and just being a shoulder to lean on. So I think that if you're really motivated to go into graduate school in psych, UK has a lot of really great clinical opportunities that you can get involved in.
One volunteer thing that I did that really also, again, solidified what I wanted to do for a future career was I volunteered at Prevent Child Abuse Kentucky for a while. It was for a social work class that I actually got involved through with it, but there I basically met with the Prevent Child Abuse Kentucky chapter, and we would discuss, how are we going to talk to government officials about laws that we need for preventing child abuse. And one of the biggest time that I volunteered there was in April, because April is Child Abuse Awareness Month. And we actually went to the Capitol, and the symbol of child abuse is a pinwheel. And we put pinwheels all around the Kentucky Capitol. And it was just such a powerful thing to be a part of, that I think while it's not fully clinical, it's such a cool experience to say, like, hey, I went to the Capitol and I got to be with these people and these lawmakers who are actually causing change in our society and in our country. And it was just such a cool non-clinical experience that I did, that I will take to graduate school with me and talk about in my interviews and be like, this is something that I did that wasn't involved with UK and wasn't involved with particularly even psychology, but just brought in so much information to myself that was so cool. And I would highly recommend trying to get involved, even if you're not interested in clinical work, just getting involved in volunteering and stuff like that. It's really a cool experience that I think a lot of people kind of toss to the side because they like that clinical work.
Yeah, speaking of being at the Capitol, I mean, if you have any interest in like the legislative side of mental health and increasing, access in your communities, you can even apply for Wildcats at the Capitol, which is a program where you spend a semester in DC working for a member of Congress. So I was also a political science major, so I went into that program and spent spring 2020 working for the House of Representatives in DC. And in that role, I actually got to work with a lot of psychologists. I worked on the ban on conversion therapy legislation. And, that's what actually really drove me to go into psychology, was learning about all the barriers that, the constituents that I worked for really faced to seeking mental health care. So, there's all different ways to have a professional opportunity through UK.
Okay, so the final piece to the framework that we will discuss today is gaining what is known as applied helping experience. An integral aspect to a career in psychology is being able to be a good therapist. This means that you should be able to use good listening skills, showcase open body language, and be overall warm and welcoming. These skills can be demonstrated on a resume or a personal statement in a variety of ways through volunteering, leadership, and internship experience. Dr. Hammer mentions that community mental health centers are the ideal place to develop this skill set. So to give a recap of what was discussed today, we covered a range of ways to set yourself up to be a successful and experienced psychology student. We discussed involvement opportunities such as the EDP internship, research labs to join, neurosci, psych, and the mentoring program, and gaining clinical experience opportunities like the Harris Center internship.
In addition, we've shared with you how to give yourself the opportunities to develop an awareness of diversity and social justice issues that are critical to being an effective counseling therapist. So if you do all these things, little by little, over your 4 years here at UK, it'll make applications a breeze. And don't forget to keep track of all the things you'll be doing. My tip is to keep a running CV called a Curriculum Vitae. And it doesn't have to be long, but keep a document where you write a summary about all the different experiences you'll have once you begin them, while you're in them, and when you finish them. And so if you want to know more about what we talked about today, go to drjosephhammer.com. You'll learn more about some of the things such as helpful resources, including undergraduate research internships, career exploration guides, and more about his lab that we're all a part of. So thank you for listening to the Hammer Intern Podcast.